We all know of the rishis of the Vedas. We have grown up honoring sages such as Vasishtha and Vishwamitra. Their teachings live on even today. But I often wondered if such a sage could exist amongst us even now. Just as we cannot fathom the glory of the ancient sages, in the same way, future generations will seldom believe that a great rishi lived in the 20th century, a stone's throw away from civilization. His teachings reinvigorated the essence of the Vedas. His life added new meaning to the Upanishads. When the world was shrouded in darkness, he appeared on the foothills of the holy Arunachala mountain to bless those seeking liberation. His gift to mankind is the direct path to self realization, and he bestowed his grace to one and all who came to him. He loved the sacred mountain dearly and exclaimed, O Arunachala, thou root out the ego of those who meditate on thee in their heart, O Arunachala. Even as a youth of 16, he took upon the mountain as his guru and worshipped Lord Shiva, who appears in the form of Arunachala. To millions of believers, he is a sage and a devotee of Lord Shiva, who shines as the holy mountain in Tiruvannamalai. To yogis, he is the king of yogis. To those on the path of self-knowledge, he is a gnani, unparalleled in the realm of knowledge. But to those who know the truth of his origins, he is none other than Shiva himself. He is the personification of Arunachala. He is the sole refuge of all those who seek his grace, and we know him as Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. Arunachala Pancharatnam is that garland of words the Maharshi authored as a tribute to Arunachala. It contains 5 hymns that beautifully express the transcendental qualities of Arunachala and its influence on the spiritual seeker's journey. Each verse of this hymn is pervaded with philosophical insights and devotional fervor, and invites the seeker to contemplate the ineffable grace and majesty of Arunachala. Let us now immerse ourselves in the sublime beauty and grace of Arunachala, allowing Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi's nectarine words and Shiva's sacred presence to illuminate our hearts and minds on the journey towards liberation. This is Kanchi, and welcome to Tapas. Verse 1. Ocean of nectar, full of grace, engulfing the universe in thy splendor, O Arunachala, the supreme itself, be thou the sun and open the lotus of my heart in bliss. This is the opening stanza of the Arunachala Pancharatnam, which is in the form of a hymn that praises God. It contains the gist of supreme knowledge. It is said to be like a sutra, very terse with much deeper significance than appears superficially. What does Arunachala mean? Aruna is light and Achala is mountain, meaning the symbol of light, also called the luminous form of Shiva. But there's another meaning as well. Aruna is that which has no runa, or that one who has no debt to pay. What debt does Shiva owe, and to whom? He is unborn and untouched. When such is the case, he is free from owing anybody anything whatsoever. He is free from the karmic cycle. He is free from karma itself. Right? So he is the creator of the universe and the original being, the supreme being that transcends the universe. So in a way, he is the creator of the karmic cycle also. So when you are the creator of the karmic cycle, how can you be bound by that? So this is Aruna. Achala also means that which is unmoving. In the material world, the mountain is Achala or unmoving. But the deeper meaning is that the self or the soul, what we call God, is unmoving. It is free from influence. Nothing can touch this self. Nothing can move this self. Nothing can move this God principle. It forever remains untouched. The deeper meaning is the self or the soul is unmoving. It is free from influence. It is that formless consciousness which is the substratum of the universe. It is the foundation of the universe. When such is the case, what can influence this formless being? This self is Aruna. This is Achala. This self is also known as God or the God principle. God is Aruna and Achala and calls out to God seeking His grace. O Arunachala, the Supreme itself, be thou the sun and open the lotus of my heart in bliss. So he is seeking the grace of Arunachala, just the way the sun opens the lotus in the mornings, the same way the seeker, that is Bhagavan, the devotee, that is Bhagavan, is praying to Arunachala to open the lotus of my heart. Just as the lotus bud, flourishing in marshy pools, blossoms at sunrise, so also the heart, behind the soiled mind, shines forth by the grace of God, who is the self of all beings and who is externally visible as Arunachala. But this sun, after rising up, never sets again, and the heart of the realized soul is in blossom once and for all. Ordinary loss of body consciousness while in shock, for example, results only in darkness, whereas the same brought about voluntarily for the purpose of self-realization ends in the illumination of the self by the grace of God. Only such illumination destroys the ego. End of verse 1.
O Arunachala, in thee the picture of the universe is formed, has its stay and is dissolved. This is the sublime truth. Thou art the inner self, who dances in the heart as I. Heart is thy name, O Lord. This verse refers to God first as creator, preserver, and destroyer, and then as realized by the enlightened one. Just as a movie plays out on a cinema screen, the whole universe appears on the screen of consciousness. This screen itself is Shiva. When light appears on the screen, we see actors and moving images. This too is deemed here to be the same Shiva. And once the movie is complete, the images disappear, but the silver screen remains. It is as it was before. Similarly, the whole world appears on the screen of consciousness and it disappears when we sleep or at the time of dissolution. Regardless, all that appears and disappears is Shiva. All appears and disappears in Shiva. This is the sublime truth, and this Shiva is none other than the self. Because the seer, the seen, and the act of seeing all appear from the seer, who is the sole support of consciousness, who is the witness of the universe. And this witness is the heart of the universe and is the basis of experience. That is why Bhagavan says, Thou art the inner self, who dances in the heart as I. Heart is thy name, O Lord. This I is not the ego. This I is the eternal I, which he calls the heart, which is Shiva, which is God itself, which is the basis of all experience and foundation of the universe. Verse 3, He who turns inward with untroubled mind to search where the consciousness of I arises, realizes the self, and rests in thee, O Arunachala, like a river when it joins the ocean. The ocean, being the store of all waters, evaporates, clouds are formed, and rain falls, giving rise to rivers which, as soon as formed, become restless, as it were, and course along as if to find their origin, and rest only after being discharged into the ocean. Similarly, the individual emanating from the heart is restless and eager to find his own source. The way is the trail of the ego into the heart. The individual is restless because he wants to find his original self, and the original self is of the nature of joy, is of the nature of peace, is of the nature of happiness. This is why every person is always looking for happiness, for joy, and for peace. Bhagavan says, he who turns inward with untroubled mind to search where the consciousness of I arises, realizes the self. So, what is untroubled mind? What does that mean? That mind which is equanimous is said to be an untroubled mind. And what is equanimity? The mind which is free from duality, free from likes and dislikes, free from desire and aversion, free from craving, free from attachment, free from jealousy. Only such a mind, which is in a natural state or which is equanimous, is said to be an untroubled mind. That mind which is free from duality, only that mind can realize the self, and it can rest in itself. It can rest in the self. The mind subsides into the self when it finds absolute equanimity. When the mind is free from duality, this mind is perfect for self inquiry. Abandoning the outer world, with mind and breath controlled, to meditate on thee within. The yogi sees thy light, O Arunachala, and finds his delight in thee. In the previous verse, Bhagavan talks about introverting the mind, turning the mind inward with an equanimous mind and going back into the self. The mind and the breath arise and fall at the same time. So if you control the mind, you can control the breath. And if you control the breath, you can control the mind. And the way to control the breath is pranayama. Focus on the arising and the falling of the breath. If you focus on the inspiration and the exhalation of the breath, you will be able to control the breath, or you will be able to introvert your mind and look at the source of this breath. What does Bhagavan mean when he says to meditate on thee within? What is within? The self is within. How do you meditate on thee within? Meditate on the sense of I amness. There is a sense of presence within all beings. So when you meditate on this sense of presence with a controlled consciousness, with an equanimous mind, and you focus your energies, you focus your mind on this sense of I amness, this sense of I, this sense of I that arises and falls with every breath. When you focus and meditate on this, then you see the light of Arunachala. But what is the light of Arunachala? The light of Arunachala is that light which exists without any support whatsoever. It is that self-shining consciousness. This is the light of Arunachala. And what is the nature of this Jyoti? What is the nature of this shining one? The nature is happiness. The nature is joy. Because when the mind is introverted and turned inward and it reaches the source of this ego, just as the river finds comfort in finding the ocean, similarly the mind finally stops jumping around and finally finds comfort in the origin of the mind, in the origin of thoughts, in the origin of ego. So this stanza deals with Yoga Marga described in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. While a Gnani seeks within for the source of the ego and is liberated on tracing it to the heart, a yogi, craving to see the glory of God, turns away from other pursuits and concentrates on Him in the name of Arunachala. The hill, though material in outward appearance, becomes full of life and is perceptible in the vision of the yogi as the universal glorious light. He who dedicates his mind to thee and seeing thee always beholds the universe as thy figure. He who at all times glorifies thee and loves thee as none other than the self. He is the master without rival, being one with thee, O Arunachala, and lost in thy bliss. The first part of this stanza deals with the path of devotion. Glorifying God with intense love, one passes beyond samsara and is happy at being merged in Him. This is Bhakti. The ego loses its fight for independence and surrenders to God. and disappears into God. This is Bhakti. This transcendental vision reveals Arunachala as one's own master, one's own guru, and such repeated experiences convince one of the immanence of God. Complete surrender of self makes sure that whatever remains over is only the all pervading, ever glorious Satchit Ananda or being consciousness. Transcendence sweeps away names and forms, and the result is infinity. It is eternity. When the bhakta or when a devotee disappears, when a devotee surrenders to God, there is no part of him which is independent of God. There is no part of him which says, I am this or I need this. All his desires disappear into God. His life is run by God. His life is run by that deity, that guru he surrenders to. So there is no such thing as independent will. There is no such thing as a separate will and separate desires. And a person who has no desire, a person who has no independent will and who has no goal or aim in life, why will he suffer? What can make him suffer? Because he has no attachment. He has no desire, he has no attachment. There is nothing in the world that can cause him any trouble whatsoever. Because if it is death, he is ready for death. If disease, he is ready for disease. If anything appears before him to trouble him, he is not afraid because he has surrendered to the divine. This gives a sense of great freedom. And so the bhakta is without fear. And a person who is without fear cannot be conquered. So it is said that the Guru himself takes over the life, or God himself takes over the life of such a one. The second part of the stanza deals with Karma Yoga, or the path of action. Feeling God's immanence everywhere, one considers oneself not as an agent. That I am doing this, I am doing that. No. But only as an instrument of God. So whatever happens, it is God's will. And God works through this person. So when you give up this sense of doership that I am doing this and I need these, the fruits of my action, and you are always in anticipation or anxiety, you're anxious and you're wondering when will you attain this. So when such a person gives up this agency and says, it is not my doing, it is God's own doing, and it becomes a tool to serve God in the shape of one's surroundings. He gives up a sense of doership and he attains absolute peace with this. So there are three aspects of God according to one's realization. They are Sat, also known as being, Chit, which is consciousness, and Ananda, which is bliss. The Sat aspect is emphasized by the Jnanis, who are said to repose in the essence of being after search for the same, with their individuality lost in the Supreme. So a Jnani, or a person who is on the path of knowledge, turns his mind inward and follows the path of self-inquiry to attain this Sat, this truth. He is looking for truth. He is a worshipper of truth. The Chit aspect is for yogis who exert themselves to control their breath in order to steady the mind, and are then said to see the consciousness of God as the one light radiating in all directions. So the yogis don't see differentiation in consciousness. All differentiation in consciousness disappears because he sees the same God in all beings. He sees the same God in all aspects of existence. His breath is God. His mind is God. His thoughts are God. His body is God. The world is God. All the good of the world, all the bad of the world. Time, gravity, no matter what he sees only God in that, and he sees the expression of God in that. So this yogi starts losing the differentiation between things. So he does not differentiate between contents of consciousness. He sees only the same consciousness shining through in all beings. The Ananda aspect is for the bhaktas or devotees who become intoxicated with the nectar of God. Their love for God is intoxicating and they lose themselves in this blissful experience. So this is complete surrender. They might be meditating on the form of God or repeating a certain mantra, but that devotion towards their chosen deity makes them lose themselves and attain the blissful experience. unwilling to leave this experience, unwilling to live this bliss and this exaltation, they remain forever merged in this, in God. So the four margas, karma, bhakti, yoga, and jnana, are not exclusive of one another. The realization of the gnani and the yogis, different sects, are not exclusive to one another. The experience finally is the same. It is the same as what we call self-realization or enlightenment or bliss. But each is, however, described separately in classical works only to convey the idea of the appropriate aspect of God and to appeal readily to the aspirant according to his predisposition. Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, for the benefit of the world, joyously bestowed in sweet Tamil Venbas the Arunachala Pancharatnam. This is the quintessential wisdom of Vedanta, which was revealed by him initially in Sanskrit. May benevolent Arunachala's name, which bestows grace, live forever. May the 5 hymns bearing his name live forever. May the feet of exalted Ramana, from whose lips the 5 hymns flowered forth, live forever. May the virtuous devotees who abide firmly in devotion to him live forever.